All right, if we are live, and I believe we are. So, welcome everybody to episode 8 of our All Pro Sports podcast here on YouTube. Tonight we got four guests here joining us here tonight: Alex Christ, Griff Barlow, Mac Baltez, and Ben Adams joining us here tonight. And very quickly, we're gonna probably just go ahead and right through our March Madness picks, either maybe just predicting our final four teams quick here before we probably delve into some of the early NFL offseason moves so far. But just to give the floor to everybody, I hope everyone has had a great last couple of months, especially since we haven't met since right before Super Bowl 52.
Yeah, no, I've been doing pretty good. Just really excited for March Madness. I know
Mhm.
kind of everyone is pretty, um, anticipated. It's been a really anticipating time just leading up to this point, especially with all the tournaments going on for the different conferences, and everything. But I'm really excited to see what this tournament's going to be like. It really doesn't seem like there's a clear cut team that's miles ahead of everyone else. Obviously, I mean, just the way that the odds have been set. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Mhm. All right. So, as I mentioned, though, if whoever kind of wants to have the floor first here, I've kind of been debating this back and forth for um, quite a number of hours, kind of going through my list. But if anybody has like their final four set or who they feel is going to be the representatives in the final four, you can have the floor first because I'm still kind of deciding right now.
I can kick things off because I'm gonna have to jump off in a few minutes here. But I honestly don't think I've ever been more uncertain looking at a bracket. Um, I have a few sleeper teams, and to be honest, I don't even know if I have a final four yet. Um, but the first sleeper team I'll start off with, hot take here. Uh, my Vermont Catamounts is a 15th seed.
Hmm.
I could see an upset there. I think it's I want to say it's their fifth consecutive tournament and maybe seventh in the John Becker's
Yeah,
12 years there.
In the
Yeah.
America East. Yeah. Hmm.
Yep. So they're my sleeper upset pick. And the rest, I think the best region is the West.
I agree.
I think UConn is a sleeper there. I could also see UCLA making it, and I mean, obviously Kansas is good too. I'm kind of surprised all of those teams ended up in one bracket or one region.
Hmm.
Um, Out of the South, I don't really love the South actually.
I don't either.
I don't really want Alabama to make it, but I kind of feel like they probably have the easiest path of any one seed. In the
Look for
East,
Creighton like a one out of the South. That's what I think.
you think Creighton's going to come out of the South?
I mean, I don't know if they'll make it out, but I mean, just looking at the bracket right now, even as a NC State fan, I can say I would give Creighton the edge there.
Mhm.
I like Creighton more than Baylor and UCSB. UCSB being one of those teams I think could upset.
I agree.
Um,
Hmm.
and I'm not too intimidated by Missouri, Utah State. Now Utah State can get hot and knock them off pretty easily. But Arizona, Bama, and Creighton are those three teams that I'm looking at out of that region.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What about the East?
So the East. So I actually have some thoughts about the East. So I think FAU is one of those teams that I don't know if they'll get over the hump and beat Purdue, but I do see them beating Memphis. Even though I know Memphis has been one of those teams where people are saying Memphis is going to come out beat Purdue with the momentum they have. Personally, I like FAU a lot. Maybe not the great matchups they're getting here, but I think they're a team to look out for. Um, as good as Oral Roberts is, I think Duke is hot at the right time.
Mhm.
But out of the rest, I like your Vermont pick. I think Vermont's a good team. And also Montana State. Not many people have really given them much attention this year. Obviously, I mean, not really many people are watching basketball out in Montana from North Carolina, but I think that, I mean, I don't know. I've seen Kansas State be really vulnerable sometimes this year, so maybe we'll see something out of that. And then the Michigan State game will be interesting as well versus USC.
Yeah.
I kind of concur with Griff's take on Oral Roberts and Duke. I mean, when I was kind of going through all those 12-5 matchups, I mean, I think these are probably some of the best 12-5s I've seen in a
Yeah.
long time. You got Oral Roberts against Duke. You got 31-3 Charleston going against San Diego State. You had what was one of the others? Yeah, Drake against University of Miami, Florida, and VCU against St. Mary's for all your 12-5. I think that's probably the most competitive 12-5s I've seen in a long, long time in this tournament.
I like VCU over St. Mary's. That's one I know everyone's been super high on St. Mary's this year. Personally, whenever they played Gonzaga, I was always on Gonzaga's side. Especially in that last game, I did not see St. Mary's pulling that out when it really mattered to Gonzaga. Teams like that in the end of the year typically always just turn it up a lot, like we saw with Duke. Then again, like I said with Duke, don't discount Oral Roberts. I mean, they've been one of those teams this year that, again, no one really is watching their conference, but except for those fans and those alumnus. But don't be surprised when Oral Roberts comes out this year and really gives a little bit of a run to Duke. Now, then again, we could just see Filipowski just dominate like he has been these last few games, especially like with Lively and Roach running that pick and roll, the two-man game whenever they get that going. I think that's like super deadly. But yeah, I think just I don't know. I would look out for some of these teams, like you said. This is the most open field I've seen in
I agree.
a long time. And I could talk about each of these matchups for a while, but just a couple have really caught my eye like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of just as I mentioned it, I mean, if I want to take the floor first here for my final four picks, just kind of really just seeing how these are going to go down here. I think for my pick for the South, I am probably going to go with Arizona as my pick for the South.
Okay.
And in the East, I think my money on the East is going to be Marquette. I think I'm going to go Arizona and Marquette for my semifinal between the South and the East. I'm still going to have to wait for a minute to pick my Midwest or West.
If you want to look at the Midwest, and then we can hop over just between us three. But I know for my South, I mean, just to go at the favorite, I'm just going to say Alabama to be safe. Like I've said though, there are some teams like Creighton. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if Utah State makes a run. I mean, when they get hot, they're hot. They're the best 3-point shooting team in the country in the regular season. Excuse me. And out of the East, I like Kentucky. I like Tennessee. I don't hate the Marquette pick either. That's not too bad. And then obviously Purdue's going to be a monster to take down with Edey. It'll be tough defending him, especially with those smaller schools. But like I've been saying, I mean, it's so wide open. Don't be surprised if really anyone out of that East bracket comes out. Honestly, looking from 1 to 16 in that East bracket, I can legitimately see each team making it to the Elite Eight, other than maybe the 16.
The one team I will be a little apprehensive about, though you kind of just were bringing that up, I think Tennessee looks extremely vulnerable right now, though.
Yeah, I don't believe
got some tough competition in the SEC in that month of February, and they kind of really struggled.
I will say Sakai Ziegler being out, I did forget about that. That's a tough blow for Tennessee. So, but they still got some guys. I mean, Vescovi should still be there. But if there were a matchup, I'd probably take Tennessee or Kentucky over Tennessee. Like we saw that matchup earlier this year with Kentucky winning. And Knoxville. I thought that was a pretty good game. Just Kentucky showing that they're still legit. But yeah. What do we think about the South and the East? Just round us out here.
Yeah, like I said, I just, Arizona and Marquette were my pick for the 2 seeds for me kind of just going through there. And I think I decided for my Midwest and West picks. I think the Midwest, I'm going to go Houston as my pick to win the Midwest. And then my West pick is going to be UCLA. So I have Arizona, Marquette, and Houston versus UCLA will be my final 4 picks for that. But kind of just overviewing of what you were saying as well, probably just before we delve a little into the NFL, one team that I can really see, I mean, I know it just seems like it could just be upset city for almost everything, but I got to watch out for some of those 30-win teams. I mean, you were just talking like Florida Atlantic, like look at the teams that have won 30 games this year. You got Charleston, you got Florida Atlantic, you got Oral Roberts, you got Houston, and I think there's one other 30-win team. No, I think that's it. But it's just you just don't think of the big dogs as much, just because everybody else just kind of was in the pecking order for
Yeah,
the most part. So
I'm a little bearish on Charleston at the moment. I'll say versus UNCW only about a week ago. We saw that. I mean, if they lose that game, they don't make the tournament, and they're the
No.
first 31 team to miss the tournament ever,
yeah,
which is crazy to think. But I'm a little. I might be selling on them a little bit here because I saw they do have some weak points. I like their coach a lot, their head coach. His name isn't coming to mind at the moment, but I'm a big fan of him. He'll probably be getting a bigger job sooner than later. And I like their play. They have they have decent guard play. I'm pretty sure they have a forward. Not coming to name either, but just watching their game, I mean, like, you can tell they have guys on their team that could be playing at much bigger programs. And I give them props to that, but I'm really not sure defensively how they're going to handle some of these monster teams when it comes to later in the tournament, like a Charleston, like an FAU. But I do like FAU to give a little bit of a run. And I know I'm a bit biased with Conference USA here, but just watching some of their games, I mean, they were dominating teams in this conference.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you see an Alabama win by 30 in their non-conference versus UTEP, I mean, you're thinking that's what Alabama does, but FAU is doing that every game to their competition. So it's kind of like, what's your measurable where it's going to be a team to watch out for? I mean, FAU is one of the best offenses in the country. So I think if they get hot, then watch out.
Yeah, Memphis, as good as Memphis played against Houston, their 2 games against right before the AAC championship game, I think, and then they just beat them then in the championship game just a few weeks ago. And I'm looking forward to all the as much as I said the 12 and 5 matchups, you look at the 8 and 9 ones. I think that's going to be the best one out of all of them, because the other ones, Maryland, West Virginia, I don't think that's going to be a really great one. What was the one that I saw when they
I
were?
will say, looking at all this, I think Memphis and FAU is going to be one of the best first round matchups we're going to see. It's just 2 teams that people maybe haven't seen so much of this year. That same with St. Mary's and VCU. I think those are even though that's a 12-5, I think those are 2 matchups that are going to really produce a good game. But for my West prediction, West and Midwest, I'll start with Midwest. Honestly, I haven't made a complete bracket yet, but just looking at some of these things, I mean, Penn State's been super hot. It wouldn't really surprise me if they knock off a Texas A&M, but then again, Texas A&M hasn't been too bad this year either, so that's tough. Just to get it out of the way, I'll pick Houston. I mean, not to scratch up the ones, all the ones here, but definitely like it. And let's see. And maybe I like Gonzaga. It's tough. I'll say I don't have an official pick out of the West, but
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to drop off here, so I'll just give you my final pick. I think I'm gonna go with UCLA as the champion.
UCLA
Okay.
is the champ.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
All
hate
right.
it. I think
Yeah.
they got a favorable first round versus UNC Asheville.
Mhm. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you a little later, Ben. Okay.
All right.
All
See ya,
right,
Ben.
sounds good. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Have a good night, Ben.
Yep, take care.
Mhm.
That's very ironic, as I also have UCLA winning it all this year.
There you
But
go.
as for me, my picks so far, I mean, I'm thinking Alabama and Duke from the left side. I think Duke's playing really good basketball at the right time, and then from the right side, I'm looking at UCLA, as I mentioned, but also Iowa State, a super streaky team, but they played a lot of good competition this year, and in that side of the bracket with Houston, Houston's a great 30-win team this year, but they've only played a team in the top 25 twice,
Right.
and they've only won one of those games. So I think it's really hard to go off that high win total. So I'm taking a little bit of an upset and taking Iowa State all the way to the Final Four.
That's a 6 seed. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I mean, Iowa State has been one of like the most inconsistent teams this year, but when they're hot, like when they're on, they're on. When they fire away. My one thing about them is Caleb Grill is no longer on the team, I believe.
Yeah.
One of their best players this year, but then again, I mean, if he was kicked off the team, maybe that's for the better. If there was something going on, I can't completely confirm that, but that's what I've known to be true. Definitely don't. I mean, I like their matchup. I think whoever comes out of Miss State and Pitt, both of those teams are also super streaky. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they came out. And I'm not super big on Xavier either. Just assuming that they're going to beat Kennesaw State. Xavier is a good team. They've been a little bit more consistent, but I'm also not too high on them either. But were there any more matchups that you wanted to talk, that either of you guys wanted to talk about? I'm just going here.
I just wanted to say, and this is not a matchup at all, but I just wanted to talk about how it's an absolute travesty that Clemson basketball is not in the NCAA tournament this year.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team that went 23-10, was fourth in the ACC with a 14-6 record, and they beat NC State 3 times this season. They're 3-0 against them by 14, 25, and then most recently winning by 26 in the ACC tournament. And to think that Clemson isn't in over NC State or in over Pitt in this in the play-in game that's this evening, I think is crazy. Not only did NC State lose to Clemson 3 times, but they also have a worse record in the ACC at 12-8. So I found that horrible. And I know Rutgers is another team that you could make a serious case for as being another team that should have been invited.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I figured we were going to see Rutgers at least in the play-in. And you make a good point about Clemson. Beating State the way they did 3 times was like pretty crazy to see State not even having to get into that play-in game, but rather just get the 11th seed. It's tough because Clemson had a few really bad losses this year. One of them being to Loyola Chicago, who I think if they win that game, they could have won that game by a point, and they're in the tournament, and they probably take State's spot. It's tough. I mean, it comes down to these fine lines. I know State a few years ago had a net ranking in I believe it was in the 30s or low 40s, and they missed the tournament, and fans were. I mean, State. It almost feels like this is what we as State fans, which I am a State fan, are getting back out of this. But like you're saying, I mean, it is pretty. I almost want to call it embarrassing to have a team beat a tournament team 3 separate times and still not even be put in the play. And I think that it just seems to be something off about that. But I think the system's shown to be unfair multiple times throughout these last few years. As fine tuning as it gets, I think that we're still going to see those snubs every single year, no matter what.
It's going to be really interesting to see how this tournament plays out. But I was going to say, we got about I think about 10 minutes before Griff, I think, was going to head out. But just before we delve into a little NFL talk, I just kind of wanted to reverberate just so in that way we kind of just get the final four picks out of the way. So my final four was Arizona, Marquette, UCLA, and Houston. What was yours, Griff?
Yeah, I'll say for me, I'll say Bama, Kentucky. I'll go with Kentucky. I've been talking them up pretty good. The Midwest is probably the most unsure I am on any. So I'll just say Houston, assuming that Sasser will come back during this tournament. And in the West, let's say UConn goes on a run. Give me UConn for the West. I'm gonna value the big man here and experience. A guy with Sonogo and Shibwe out of UConn and Kentucky, respectively.
Okay.
I think we're gonna see some of that low man game really dominate, especially when it comes to just exposing the paint. Yeah, I mean that's just my thinking. Out of these teams I'm picking, could be completely wrong. I mean we see Final Four, we see 14, 15 seeds get there every couple years, so I'm just excited to watch. But
who's your pick for the national championship?
My national championship, I'll say Alabama and Alabama and UConn, and then I think Alabama comes on top, 68-61.
Okay, and Mac, what was your final four?
Yeah, Final Four for me, I was looking at Alabama and Duke on the left side, and then I had Iowa State and UCLA on the right.
Okay, and then your championship pick for those two?
Duke UCLA, with UCLA coming out on top.
UCLA. Okay, my two. I'm gonna go Marquette against Houston, and I'm gonna pick Marquette as my national champion this year.
Marquette. Okay.
Yeah,
that'd be exciting.
That would be. Mm-hmm.
They have I like Kolek. He's a really good player.
Yeah.
Number 11 on Marquette. He's a stunner. I think he got their Player of the Year this year in the Big East. So that's so that'll be fun to watch. But if you have any more tournament talk, I'd be glad to keep going. Unless you want to go ahead and go to free agency before I head out.
Let's go ahead and jump right into free agency here.
If you don't mind, just me making just a couple quick points. Sure, I was going to bring my top 5 in with me today of my top 5 signings. Because I thought there's like 100 in the last 48 hours. I thought it was crazy. I mean, it's funny because right before we got on, and Andy Dalton gets signed to the Panthers. Hilarious, honestly. But whatever. I think some sneaky signings we saw. The Dolphins getting David Long Jr., the linebacker from the Titans last year, I believe he had 100+ tackles. They got him for $11 million for 2 years. Great signing. The Panthers re-signing Bradley Bozeman to a 3-year deal. Their center from last year. Great signing for them. Yeah, and then I'll just say the Bears organization in general. I mean, if let's just say the Panthers' first pick doesn't work out in the next 5 years, it's a fleecing, is what it is. Assuming that we don't get our franchise guy. And then the Broncos' offensive line. I mean, getting Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers from the Ravens, locking both of them down for multi-year deals. I think we're going to see a lot of improvement out of the Denver Broncos this year. Maybe not immediate, but there's definitely going to be something out of that. And then finally, actually, I'll just stop it right there and hand it to you guys because I think those were just the couple that I remember that really stuck off the page. Outside of the Texans also making some moves as well. I know the Texans free agency so far has picked up pretty well. I think they got Jimmy Ward and Robert Woods, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, but I'll hand it back to you guys because I know there's so much to talk about.
What I was going to tell you as well, kind of sticking with the Panthers, though, I liked it when they grabbed Von Bell to help.
Yeah, I was excited about that. I wanted to be Jesse Bates, though.
Yeah, I was impressed with that. And kind of speaking about this with a Mac's point of view, I think his audio was off, but kind of seen like what's happened with Cincinnati though, losing both Jesse Bates and losing both Von Bell. They're gonna have to retool, their secondary unit quite a bit, and just it's kind of one of those things I was always so apprehensive about with Mike Brown as well. It's kind of like their acting GM, you could say Duke Tobin, even though he's not really the GM. I think he's like the director of player personnel, but I mean, he's just gonna have to revamp that secondary unit for Cincinnati after losing those two guys.
Definitely, I think, and if I'm being honest, I think the Jesse Bates situation was handled horribly by the Cincinnati front office because it was drawn out so long. We could never get him to an extension, and honestly, it didn't seem like a huge overpay for Atlanta. I believe 4 years, 16 per, which isn't a ton of money for I would say a very high caliber safety. As far as my thoughts on free agency so far in the offseason, I've been very shocked at the Panthers' moves. I think the Panthers could have been a lot smarter in many different ways, but also just with some recent signings, I'm very shocked about what some quarterbacks are deciding to do. I think Andy Dalton, for him, it's a no-brainer to take the money and come to Carolina. However, Sam Darnold to take money to play backup in San Francisco, and for Mike White to take a deal as a backup in Miami, I thought for sure both of those guys would be looking to possibly earn a starting job somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of like the Mike White signing. I mean, it's pretty crazy coming out of, I believe he was a third, fourth string guy, coming in as a rookie, and now he's signing for $11 million to be a backup, taking over. I'm guessing for Bridgewater and Thompson, they're going to move away from them and look to have Mike White as that primary second guy. We know that with the way Tua's career is going so far, I mean, we only know how many more games he's going to be able to play, which is a serious thing at this point in his career, unfortunately.
I agree completely. I don't mean from the team perspective. I'm very surprised that Darnold and White both made those decisions, thinking they possibly could have gotten a starting job somewhere else.
I think I will say, I mean, I really did like Sam Darnold. Definitely got too much hate just all around because he always was a super nice guy. I mean, like, not to really put it on Baker Mayfield, but like, I mean, he came in, like I didn't really dislike him necessarily, but I mean, there were times in the season where, he would get booed by the fans and rightfully so. I mean, honestly, and then, make a mockery of everybody in the press conference and really just make it seem like he didn't want to be there whatsoever, or he didn't really care for the fans and their opinion. It was just immediately like, you knew he wasn't going to stick there too long.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, Sam, I thought it made a little bit of sense. It's kind of a carousel out there in San Francisco these last few years with the way injuries have been. But honestly, I'd really love to see him succeed. Sam always took it in. I mean, fans really gave him crap a lot of years, but this past year he really performed and showed that he can be like that guy whenever an injury comes up. I mean, he's going to be that first guy to show up on any team and can perform for you. So I was happy to see him get signed, honestly.
I am too. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how his future is in San Francisco, knowing that Jimmy Garoppolo just being inked a 3-year deal by the Raiders. It was so funny. I was just thinking about this the other day, kind of going a blast from the past here before Griff leaves. What's crazy when I was thinking about this is you think of Jimmy Garoppolo's career. I know this is kind of like a weird comparison, even though it's like they don't really compete against each other and they kind of really don't like sense it. But you think of Jimmy Garoppolo and Jim Plunkett when Plunkett was the number 1 overall pick by the Patriots in 1971. Then he goes to San Francisco for a few years, just kind of as a no-name backup for that time. And then he goes to the Raiders, and then he wins 2 Super Bowls with them after kind of being with Pastorini. Garoppolo is kind of in the same thing now. He wasn't a first-round pick by the Patriots, but he goes to Patriots, backs up Brady, and then kind of has a little bit of success in San Francisco, gets the 49ers to 2 NFC championship games, but, they kind of were willing to get him off, and now McDaniels has him in Vegas on a 3-year deal. So.
Yeah, no, I thought that was like super interesting. I think just in general, I mean, looking at this list of free agents and movement so far, I mean, I think it's really wild what some teams are really willing to pay for. Um, Kind of like that was mentioned, Jesse Bates going to Atlanta, really dumping him, giving him as much money as he wanted. And I had one more point to make. Uh, that's all right. Um, I just think, but like I was saying, I'm pretty honestly proud of the way the Broncos have been so far, making it known that they're going to still compete and that they're not really looking to build through the draft as much as they are. Just getting those pieces around Russ now, knowing that they have a good defense, they have a good, they have a good core group, I think still. But going ahead and grabbing, I think it was Zach Allen on the D line from the Cardinals,
Right. Yeah.
which is sneaky good because he was a performer for them. I mean, and not many people were tuned in as much, especially towards the end of the year. But the guy can play, and Samaje Perine just signed to them today as
Yeah.
well.
I like that move a lot.
Yeah, I do too. And like you kind of think about some of the guys that Russ has had, like when they don't have a Marshawn Lynch there, that he can really operate out of the pocket and use that running back as a weapon, which Perine can be. So, did you have any final points you want? And the Eagles as well, getting Bradbury back. I think that's huge. People may want to talk about, the mistake in the Super Bowl, but honestly, he was such a performer all year that I really wanted the Panthers to go and get him.
I wanted to. Yeah.
Before we got Von Bell, thought we were a little bit in trouble with our secondary. But still, I mean, even now, I would still have taken them, considering that we don't really have that second corner. But if there's anything else you wanted to kind of touch on before I head out here, I'd be
probably just going through like some of the major ones as well. Probably just kind of seeing like as far as like quarterbacks go. Obviously, I was kind of impressed that Derek Carr got inked to the Saints, kind of certainly dictating with their future as well. And I'll say this is true for Atlanta. I know everyone's kind of saying about with Tampa Bay and Carolina, and I'll make this quick, but just knowing that Kyle Trask seems to be like almost what Jason Licht and those guys are, and then of course who knows what Fitterer is going to do at number one, either if he's going to get Stroud or if he's going to get Young. I have no idea what he's thinking, but I think if Atlanta stands pat on Desmond Ridder, which I think he's got potential to be, I wouldn't say an all-pro quarterback, but I think he's got potential with his intelligence and his experience at Cincinnati. I just think both Atlanta and New Orleans have done far better with their GMs than what Fitterer and Licht have done. And then maybe just really briefly before you leave, I got to kind of throw like one quick thing about my Giants inking that deal for Darren Waller today, as well as kind of getting that linebacker from Billy's Indianapolis Colts as well. I kind of was impressed with Joe Shane's moves so far. It's been smart, but he's also looking to upgrade the Giants kind of through some cheap means. And, that's what I am kind of liking from Joe Shane so far as the Giants GM this offseason.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. Like with the Giants, I mean, they're obviously another team kind of like the Broncos. You can tell they want to win now. Getting Shepard back, getting I believe they just signed they re-signed Wyatt Davis, their starting guard. And I think they got a couple other guys. And like you were just saying, Waller, that's huge. And the linebacker from Indy, another really good piece on that defense. So I don't know. I really wouldn't be surprised if we see the Giants make a run again, bringing this team back and adding a few pieces there. I'm pretty excited to see it. But besides that, I think that's about it for me. I know I just saw Adam Thielen is taking a visit to the Panthers. So maybe that'll be a little exciting seeing him getting paired. It looks like from rumblings around the Panthers, we're probably looking to take Stroud. It looks like Stroud or Young, or if we trade back to 3 or 4, then that may be a spot we get Richardson. Which Scott Fitter, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Being the GM he is, he's hyper aggressive, way more aggressive than any GM we've had in our history. In the only 3 years he's been here, with David Tepper, our short tenured owner. They've shown to be like super aggressive in how they're managing the team so far, whether it be in moves and how we're upgrading facilities in the stadium and adding a dome to our it's like all these things that they're showing that we want to make as much progress as we can, but we can't do that until we find that guy at quarterback and we get the weapons around him that he needs. Because right now the positions that the Panthers need is obviously the quarterback and the tight end, which has been a nobody since we lost Greg Olsen.
Glaring issue.
Yeah, and then obviously the receivers, which haven't been as much of an issue, but without a tight end threat, which you need in the modern NFL, it just hasn't been there. And like you were saying with Ritter, I mean, he is the perfect prototype for the modern quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he can sling the ball. He's a little older. He's fine tuned. He's a smart guy, and he can use his feet. So I think if the Panthers are looking to make a move, I would say maybe Stroud, because Stroud is all those things for the modern quarterback. But it's just a matter of will he be able to perform when it comes to operating an NFL offense. And I'm not sure about that, but I am excited to see what it kind of ends up happening because at the end of the day, I mean, the Panthers needed a quarterback, and we knew this move had to happen whether we lose a guy or two. I'm glad we kept Brian Burns, considering that he's a part of the defense, and that's been a staple piece of the Panthers these last 2 years, these last two struggling years. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to leave on that final point of exciting in Carolina right now, and exciting really all around the NFL. Just with the way it reminds you that football is coming around soon.
Sure. I just wanted to say this really quick before you hop out as well. Just kind of a quick announcement, kind of for us, obviously, that we had here tonight, but also just kind of seeing how things are going to transpire over the next month. I'm going to see probably it's not going to happen on draft night, but what I would love to do is as soon as probably like either CBS Sports or whoever releases their NFL drafts that week before the NFL draft, I'd love to have everybody at least on one broadcast that week to not only make your draft picks, but also to kind of oversee like what happened with the NFL offseason. I'm hopefully going to target for that week. Obviously, we'll try and maybe meet once beforehand, but just kind of a little quick announcement I wanted to field out there. So.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely down for that. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I appreciate you guys. Talking to you guys is always fun. And yeah, I guess we'll catch up in a week or two and try to talk some more ball. I know there's definitely going to be some more signings. We'll see where Aaron Rodgers goes. Yep. I was really hoping the Panthers, but I might as well go to the Jets and stay out of the NFC.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'll see you guys. I appreciate it, Alex.
All right. Have a good night, Griff. Okay.
Good night. Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting points that Griff just made. I think if you're a Panthers fan, I think it's a precarious situation. I agree that they needed to go under a rebuild. I just don't think that they've gone about it the right way.
Yeah.
And to address what you've said about the Panthers and the Buccaneers with their quarterbacks, although neither team, well, I should say, although the Buccaneers haven't been really aggressive, I do still see them as a team if they pick up the right guy could still be a solid threat this season. I mean, you're looking at the quarterback carousel, which keeps spinning around endlessly, and you still see that there's Carson Wentz available. Matt Ryan just got cut today. Right. So, I mean, there's still some more than serviceable quarterbacks out there. And to think that you could get them for a cheap price, it might be worth the risk, especially if you're a team like the Buccaneers, who are not really a Super Bowl contender, but also not really ready to blow it up quite yet either.
Mm-hmm. I just really kind of have thought for so many years as well. Even when they got Tom Brady the few years ago, I just kept saying to Tampa Bay, I mean, you got to start preparing for the future. And as much as I liked Kyle Trask at first when they picked him from the University of Florida, I mean, when he got outplayed by Skylar Thompson last preseason, I said, that guy's not going to be your solution. I mean, I just don't know what they would see in him. I get, like you said, Matt Ryan's out there, and certainly Carson Wentz and guys could get a second chance, but Tampa Bay's issues have just been that for so long. I mean, just they have not been a team that's been able to just build an offensive identity for so long. I mean, they've just been a defensive team when they've had success. I mean, obviously they kind of took a step back in defense. Brady's second to last year, not last year, but the previous year before. But still, I just think Licht and those guys just kind of are trying to reset the market in terms from where they are. But certainly, this is going to be interesting though for free agency. Of course, we kind of briefly kind of discussed about this. I was wondering if there was any other free agent moves you noticed or anything in the NFL that kind of piqued your interest over the last few days. I think I might have lost Mac briefly here. I think I might have lost Mac for a second. Kind of has been a bit of a struggle with our devices here tonight, but certainly, hopefully next time, we'll try and kind of get the technical difficulties taken care of here. But sort of as I mentioned though as well, certainly looking at the college basketball thing, I think I think possibly Texas A&M Corpus Christi is just wrapping up their game probably soon against Southeast Missouri State. Hopefully, when we finish this, Mississippi State and Pittsburgh, I'll be definitely watching that in just a few minutes. Excuse me.
Yeah, I apologize. I lost you there again for a minute. I've had a rough go with my computer this evening.
It's okay. I think I was just asking you just before you cut off if there was like any other like free agent moves or anything that kind of has caught your eye over the last
I would say
24, 48 hours.
not necessarily a move, but one thing that surprised me tremendously was the request of Austin Eckler to want out of the Los Angeles Chargers. I thought that was huge, especially with a running back free agent class that doesn't look that big, and with McCaffrey being traded around the deadline last season, you're thinking of a pretty big haul for, even though he's getting older, a really efficient running back in Austin Eckler. So I'm interested to see where he goes or if he stays and how the Chargers negotiate that, because he's such a huge part of their offense.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how. I mean, obviously, I heard Griff's points about how Denver's kind of retooling right now under Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, and certainly, I just think the way the AFC is stacked right now. I mean, obviously, I know that there's going to be teams that are going to be in the bottom of the pecking order, probably more primarily in the AFC South and probably any other division. But I'm really just excited to see how the AFC is going to turn out next year. Obviously, I know we are speculating the rumors of Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets. I mean, certainly see how Josh Allen and Rodgers kind of perform. And of course, we were talking about Tyler Viola's future. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, your Bengals, kind of going through their issues right now, even though what I will say is that, kind of as I talked briefly, one of the big things that I have always kind of noticed about with Mike Brown and really I think Duke Tobin, I guess, is like their player of personnel who Cincinnati has. I mean, this is the time I think right now where they either need to be aggressive in free agency to get upgrades to their secondary unit or maybe just, find a draft pick to do it. But I mean, I think that's the one thing that I've always kind of been questioning about the Bengals, like over the last 15 years or so, especially kind of like what happened with Carson Palmer when he was there. And now it just kind of feels with Joe Burrow, even though I know Burrow and that offense are just going to be fantastic, hopefully once again next year. But I mean, certainly some drastic changes to the Bengals franchise so far this offseason.
I agree, and we did we did take a safety early in the draft last year.
Mhm.
So I believe the first priority will be addressing the issue of the secondary in the draft. However, I think it's also worth noting some other moves that other teams have made, and you could say, hey, well, maybe the Bengals could have made that move. And in particular, I think of Stephon Gilmore getting traded
Right.
earlier today
Mhm.
for what seemed to be a low price. As far as the AFC goes, I think it's terrible because if you're a fan of an AFC team, it's an absolute madhouse. It seems like the past few years that any single AFC team can beat any other AFC team, and the top, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 seeds are all worthy of winning the Super Bowl. Or on the other side of the NFC, it looks like maybe only 2 or 3 of them
Mhm.
are capable. So it will certainly make the playoffs a bloodbath next season,
Mhm.
especially if Aaron Rodgers goes to New York. And I have a great feeling that's going to happen as Alan Lazard was signed earlier today.
And especially with offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett being signed there as well, kind of pair both of them up as they were in Green Bay a few years ago. Um, probably like one or two of the last things I kind of mentioned. Obviously, I kind of mentioned about that announcement about meeting before the NFL draft. Obviously, like I said, we're not going to have a podcast on draft night, but hopefully either that Tuesday or that Wednesday before we'll kind of figure this out. But probably just briefly, maybe going into Major League Baseball or the NBA before we wrap this up. I'd probably like to hit this off probably at right about an hour for this broadcast here. But kind of what I wanted to ask you is like, have you kind of seen anything, or kind of like what are your thoughts about your St. Louis Cardinals so far in um, training camp and preseason with the regular season about 2 weeks away?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as far as the Cardinals go and my thoughts for spring training, my thoughts are that I have none because the St. Louis Cardinals have the most players going to the World Baseball Classic with
Mhm.
17. So
Wow.
that's a huge portion of the team.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys, I'm sure viewers or listeners at home are familiar with on Team USA: Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Adam Wainwright, Miles Michaelis, but even players like Jojo Romero's is playing, I believe, for Team Mexico, and Lars Nootbaar is playing for Team Japan, as well as a very hot Tyler O'Neill, who
Yeah.
was 4 for 4 the other night, and
Mm.
I believe is batting over 700 right now for the World
Wow.
Baseball Classic.
Mm.
So, although there hasn't been too much in the Cardinals spring training, there's been a lot of stuff going on with the World Baseball Classic. The
Mhm.
USA picked up a huge win last night,
Yeah.
a mercy rule win over Canada, 12-1. I
Hmm.
have been keeping up with that. As far as the Cardinals offseason goes, I wish they would have been a little bit more proactive about
Mhm.
grabbing another starting pitcher or two.
I agree.
But other than that, there's not too much to complain about. It's a tough situation to be in because it's understood that the key players are going to come from the NL East and the NL West, and I
Mhm.
can't fault the Cardinals for wanting to stay a little bit under the radar in the Central, and then battling out with those teams when they need to in the playoffs.
Mhm. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how, like, obviously, like I mentioned this, I think, earlier when we met in February, obviously just kind of seeing just the way the NL Central is right now. It's just amazing to me just to see, because, I mentioned this about my grandpa being a Chicago Cubs fan. It's just amazing to me how quickly Chicago just blew up their team. And then obviously you kind of just see the rest of the teams. I just can't pick like a team like underneath St. Louis right now, maybe Pittsburgh, but I think Milwaukee could easily take a step back this year, but just none of those teams in the Central just scare me other than St. Louis. It's crazy to me that just that, whole division has just been, a mess other than St. Louis ever since Chicago just blew it up. I mean, everybody else is just like second or third tiers underneath St. Louis. So.
Definitely, I think the Brewers and Cubs have made notable moves. However, I believe the Cardinals' success is the only success in that division that's guaranteed. I think the Cardinals will have a good season no matter what. Now with the Cubs, signing Jamison Tyone to pretty big money, getting Cody Bellinger for 1 season for solid money, and then also getting Dansby Swanson. This is a team that has potential to take down the Cardinals. However, you're asking yourself, are you getting a good version of Jamison Tyone, and also are you getting the MVP version of Cody Bellinger? Because if you're getting the version that has been the past few seasons, then I'll be the first to tell you that the Cubs won't enjoy a tremendous amount of success next season.
No, it's gonna be tough for certainly for those teams there. Certainly, I'll say this briefly about my Mets. Certainly, just kind of was disappointed to see Jose Quintana. I think just recently they said they're going to shut him down. I think for a few months after his thing, but as much as I like what Steve Cohen's moves have been for the Mets, and obviously he's not a cheap owner as what the Wilpons were. I just think my thing for the Mets this year is just knowing how competitive they were last year, and even though they lost the division to Atlanta right in the last few weeks in September, I just think as far as the Mets go, I mean I know you got like a veteran staff as far as like pitchers, and you got certainly some great guys on your roster to play the field and of course be at the plate, but just I just think that this is going to be a huge test for the Mets, if they can stay healthy. Obviously, I mean I know they got the firepower to do it, but I just think it's just kind of a veteran roster that they're just really trying to win with, and I just don't know if it's going to help them throughout the whole season. Hopefully just what happened to Quintana doesn't really happen to any of their other pitchers or any other players that they have, but I'm looking forward to it. But just, I think it's going to be a challenge for the Mets, certainly seeing how Atlanta's proven to be, and certainly we'll probably watch out for what the Phillies have in store for that division this year.
Definitely. I think of the two, I believe the Phillies will be the bigger threat than Atlanta. Although they lost Dansby Swanson and they have Vaughn Grissom coming up, they did add Sean Murphy at the catcher position. I think he's a big upgrade. And as far as the Mets go, it's an interesting formula for success. They picked up some veterans to put in their rotation, and they also picked up Kodai Senga,
Right.
the Japanese phenom. And I think their pitching staff will be okay just because of how deep they are. But with these older guys, you are in Verlander, you're thinking about possible injuries down the road. I think with some possible injuries and with the age of their pitching staff, they're going to need to make maybe a couple moves around the deadline to really reinforce their roster. However, if I'm the Mets and I'm the Braves, I'm very scared of the Philadelphia Phillies right now, and I think the only reason why maybe some other teams could catch a break from the Phillies is Bryce Harper's injury for like almost half of the season, because it seems he might be able to come back around All-Star break. Other than that, the Phillies look like a really good team. They upgraded their rotation, they upgraded their bullpen, they added Trey Turner. The Phillies spent a lot of money, but made some tremendous moves, and we'll have to see coming up with baseball if money can finally win championships, because there's been a lot of owners spending a lot of crazy money, and so far it hasn't resulted in championships, but we'll have to see.
We will. It's going to be interesting to say the least. And actually, just right before we probably just briefly delve into the NBA before we wrap this up, I kind of wanted to ask you really quick about your thoughts of what you've seen about the pitch clock so far in spring training, and kind of your thoughts about that, kind of going into the season. Just kind of wanted to get your thoughts about that.
Sure, yeah, the pitch clock and also the bigger bases. I think it's a tremendous change for baseball. I don't think it's a great thing. I think
No.
too often times in sports, I think we mess with a good thing, and baseball's been, in my eyes, one of the greatest sports ever since it's been invented. I've always enjoyed watching postseason baseball. I've always enjoyed the 162 game season. As far as the pitch clock goes, it's something implemented in order to make the game faster. And although I understand that, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to mess with these
Doesn't.
pitchers' timing. And I even was reviewing it a little bit today. Kenley Jansen is the slowest pitcher in Major League Baseball with
Wow.
runners on base.
Hmm.
And this is a guy who's in his mid-30s and just signed a big deal with the Boston Red Sox. To
Mhm.
think that the MLB is, I guess, throwing a wrench into the careers or the plans of these players who have never had to deal with this sort of rule before. So it's very
Right.
interesting to think of these rules, not how they're affecting teams, but just how they're affecting pitchers and players. As far as stolen bases go, I think we're going to see a lot more of them.
I agree. Mhm.
However, I won't say that it's going to work out how baseball wants it to, where you have five guys, stealing 50, 60 bases.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think it's going to be up to the manager and up to the teams how much they want to run.
Right. I'll say this probably just right before we go into one of my faults about the pitch clock. I mentioned this, I think, to one of my other co-hosts, Billy, when we were talking about this over spring break. My issue with the pitch clock really is I think it almost just essentially like throws out all the catcher signals basically. Because like if you're basically the pitcher and you have like 3 or 4 pitches you go and you basically shake off all four, I mean, you're going to get a pitch clock violation probably more often than not. And I just think, it almost basically ditches like the catcher signals, or it probably just makes pitchers even that more predictable, knowing that, they only got 15, 20 seconds essentially to decide like what pitch they're going to throw. And to me, you almost just kind of like bypass all the catcher signals and you basically have the pitcher trying to get into the batter's head. But as far as like pitchers go, the often thing is said, you just can't be too repetitive with one pitch unless the batters finally get it. I think that's kind of really what the pitch clock affects more than anything.
Exactly, and I have seen pitcher pitch com being used in spring training by Zach Greinke in particular, where the pitchers have the option to call the pitches. So I do think that's an interesting component. But at the end of the day, the baseball game should be decided by whether somebody swings and misses or they swing and hit a ball.
Yep.
And early in spring training, we saw games that were decided because a pitcher took too long to throw the pitch. The game ended before the pitcher even threw the pitch. So, regardless of the outcome of the pitch, I think it's important that the game ends due to one team succeeding or another team failing. And in my eyes, a pitcher that takes 1 or 2 seconds over the 15-second clock or whatever it is it's a bad way to lose a game, and I think it's a bad look for baseball.
Mhm. I agree. And, certainly I think, it's going to be unique to see how, teams kind of essentially fare with that for the regular season. But kind of seeing that we're just about to really kind of wrap this up here at about the 1 hour mark here, what I kind of just wanted to have you do, if you just wanted to do this for your last word, if there was anything in the NBA or anything else that you kind of just wanted to bring up before we wrap this up for the night.
Sure, yeah, I know you want to keep it to that 1 hour mark. Since my Boston Celtics unfortunately are playing some of the worst basketball of their season. I've been I have been, struggling to watch their highlights as they're not playing well, but I've also been watching a lot of other highlights, and I will say the Sacramento Kings are very fun to watch. It's
They're on
very
fire.
cool to
Mhm.
see the Kings be successful. And the other night, watching the highlights of the Kings and Bucks, they put up a valiant effort against the Bucks, and the Kevin Herter Domantas Sabonis pick and roll was lethal toward the
Mhm.
end of that game. It was really fun to watch. So the Kings, a great young team.
Mhm.
They got a lot of flack for trading Tyrese Halliburton, but so far it's worked out solid for him.
It's perfect.
Sabonis,
Yeah.
I can't speak higher about Sabonis. He's an amazing player, and if
No.
he's somebody who can improve his defense just even to an all defensive caliber, you're talking about one of the best big men in the NBA for sure.
He was a pest for so long when he was in Indiana. I always remember watching the Knicks play the Pacers when he was there in Indiana, and he would always just give me fits when I would see him just either, just bodying up, just getting like the tough points inside, or just really just kind of being the way that the Knicks and Pacers are. But I wanted to say
Definitely.
this, I know this was so hard probably for you a couple of weeks ago, but I saw that whole Knicks and Celtics game a couple of weeks ago. I'll tell you, Emmanuel quickly in that game, he just looked like the Energizer Bunny when he played those 55 minutes against Boston. And even when that game was over, it felt like he could have played a third overtime. I was like, you've got to be kidding with a player playing 55 minutes. And it's like he didn't even lose a step when he was playing against Boston. And obviously, I mean, the Knicks are missing Jalen Brunson badly, even though they won their 40th game against LeBron and the Lakers a few days ago. They got a big game against Portland, I think, tonight. But, certainly it's going to be interesting to see where the Knicks kind of figure that stuff out. But I just kind of wanted to throw that one thing about quickly, though, playing those 55 minutes against Boston. I just kind of was saying to myself, he just looked like the Energizer Bunny, like he didn't even want the game to end.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's known around the NBA and even around fans is that anybody who plays for Tom Thibodeau expect to play a lot of minutes. Tom Thibodeau plays his starters so much, but that was a crazy game, definitely.
That was nuts when they went down a couple of weeks ago. But probably just before we wrap this up, though, just wanted to see if you had the last word, or just see if there was anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap up.
Yeah, not too much, or not anything in particular. I think there's a lot of loose ends to be tied up. We have to wait to see what happens with the World Baseball Classic. We're gonna have to wait and see a little bit more on some NFL free agency, and then sooner or later, within the next little while, we're gonna get started with some NBA playoffs. So I believe in the next week or so, we should see more of a clear picture of what teams will be playing in the play-in tournament, which I'm not a big fan of, but it will be interesting, especially with how tight the Western Conference is right now. So I'll be on the lookout for that. And also, we still have to look and take time and see about these Phoenix Suns acquiring Kevin Durant. So with with them being able to get some time playing together over the end of the regular season, we'll see how good they look together come time for the postseason.
We certainly will, and certainly, hopefully, before then, we'll probably make our NBA picks for all of our NBA analysis that we have on here. But this is host Alex Christo, thanking everybody for joining us here tonight on episode 8 of the All Pro Sports Podcast. As I mentioned, certainly it's going to be a fun next couple of weeks. Obviously, March Madness coming up, and as Max just stated as well, the NBA and certainly baseball coming up. We're certainly going to have a lot more creative episodes. And one last thing as well, probably just a little pet project for myself. I'll probably just do this for my purposes, but certainly with the new look, USFL returning for its second year, expect a couple of historical broadcasts from me for myself as I kind of break down from the old USFL of the 1980s and the new look USFL right now with just the USFL draft just last month. But this is Alex Chris and Mac Baltez, as well as my former hosts Ben Adams and Griff Barlow, signing off here on episode 8 of the All Pro Sports Podcast, and we will see you all next time. Have a good night, everybody.